Hi, my name is Gayle Febbo. I'm the VP Exploration for Kingfisher Metals. Kingfisher is operating in BC. We're exploring for high-grade copper and gold in underexplored districts.
Gayle, thank you very much for the introduction and really nice to meet you. I'm looking forward to the next half an hour, 40 minutes talking through your projects with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Now, I spoke to Dustin pretty much 6 months ago, just under 6 months ago. And I remember being struck, by the really good quality of the photographs that you guys had taken. He had one of his ski buddies who'd been up with the previous scene and got a whole bunch of really good images, but also the kind of the underexplored nature of where you are. I recall that you had these three projects. There was Goldrange, and they had the VMS one, and then you had the Thibert one up in the far north. But you're very much focused on Goldrange, aren't you? And are you actually at the Goldrange camp at the moment?
That's right. I'm on site right now. Goldrange has taken most of our exploration money this year. It's really been our focus right now.
Remind me, can you just kind of can you share a map with me, just kind of put into context where it is, and just talk to me about your trip there and how do you get there? Is it you just before we started, you said you've got some investors visiting. How do they come in? Do they come in by helicopter, or can they drive some of the way? What are the logistics like?
Sure. All right. So this is kind of the big picture here. This is a BC scale map, and you can see the location of our other projects, Thibert, Ecstall. So we're in a pretty nice region of BC. It's relatively mild down here, and people often fly into Williams Lake, which is about a 3-hour drive into the project. So you fly from Vancouver up to Williams Lake and then drive in along the highway. We're only about 20 minutes from the highway on a gravel road, so it's excellent access. We've got road access to the property. There's also you can fly to Anaheim Lake as well, which is only about an hour. So really easy getting people in and out.
So could you just show me with your mouse where those kind of air landing strips are?
Yeah, well, so Anaheim would be just north, I believe, and then Williams Lake would be over here to the east. Okay,
and there we go. There's the Goldrange project.
Yeah. So here's Williams Lake. This is a better view actually, and then this is about a 3-hour drive. And then we just come south a little bit on this gravel road, and our camp's like right at the White Saddle Air Base, and which is just kind of on the margin of the claims here.
Thank you. Thanks. So what altitude is the camp?
Oh, I don't know if I know that offhand. That's a good question. We've got a pretty big range like throughout the project, because this is the Waddington mountain range. Waddington's the biggest mountain in BC, I believe, and so there's a big range of peaks and valleys here.
And what height do you spend most of your time working? Where are the three main names that I can remember from Goldrange are Cloud Drifter, Langara, and Day Tripper. And I've just seen from your news releases that you're really focused on Day Tripper at the moment. What rough altitude is that at?
Day Trip, I think, is around 1,200 meters elevation, and Cloud Drifter is a little bit lower than that, but it does go up to that elevation as well. So there's a pretty good range there. And
so the camp is kind of in a valley, well below that. So it feels mountain air, but not high.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've met you. You've spent your little bio on the web page says you've spent 17 years working in BC. Have you worked in similar kind of areas to this before?
I really cut my boots in the Iskut mining district. So that's KSM, Brucejack, Galore Creek. That's what promoters would call it, the Golden Triangle. So I've worked with a lot of structurally controlled gold systems. I haven't worked in this area before, actually. So it's quite new to me, but a lot of similar themes for sure.
When you say similar themes, you mean as in structurally controlled gold mineralization?
That's right. I think the biggest theme is the significance of deep structures. So, translithospheric structures are a great place to explore, and if you're in those locations, you can make kind of a wide range of mineral systems. So, in the isket, in that case, you can see porphyry deposits, calcalcalic, alkalic. You'll see epithermal vein, NVMS, all in very close proximity, and they're tapping the same translithospheric structure, and that's sort of the common denominator to these gold systems. And I think that's a big theme in gold systems in general, and that's something that is proving up quite well here, is the importance of that Geological fault complex that comes through here. It's a major crustal break. And so that's kind of the theme that I'm seeing. And then obviously on the deposit scale as well, structurally controlled gold systems are, they behave similarly in the patterns that we see. The age is different. So we're looking at Cretaceous aged systems, and up there, obviously, well, there is a range. And part of the reason for that is that structure is always there. So you get different mineral events over time, and what they have in common is the structure. And we see that here as well. You get, porphyry systems coming through vein systems, and then orogenic, so there's kind of that hybrid setting where you can find a lot of different mineral styles.
Yeah, I've been listening to some lectures by John Hronsky on YouTube, and he is very much kind of a mineral systems guy, and he's talking about those translithospheric structures, which where they are fertile, they are active at different periods over time. So you have periods of quiescence and then periods of activity, and they can be covered and then reactivated. And if they're in the right, if they've got the tapping kind of the right metallogenic zones, you will get mineral deposits along it. And the geometries, the manifestation will depend on the local rheologies, the local site-specific stress fields, the local chemistries, the different geologies and pressures and temperatures and timings. But you can be sure that they will be there. And it's really the job of the geologists to kind of put everything together and to almost predict what's going to be there.
Yeah, well, I could talk about this all day. I should probably stop myself, but this is overlaps with some of my master's thesis work around Bruce Jack, KSM, and just sort of that structural common denominator that they have with SK, and how those pattern out differently, whether you're making a rift or under compression, or these different structural settings. As you said, it can play out really differently. But what's important is that that process that's happening at depth and the presence of that structure, and you kind of need that to begin with. And I think that's so important with exploration in general. You need to be looking in the right place, and if you're in the right place, you can get lucky. But if you're not kind of working with these first order gold controls, why bother? You can find gold everywhere almost, but you want to reduce your risk in the first place with the claims that you're getting. And that's something we really believe in. Thibert is the same thing, where we've staked kind of that whole structural, that crustal break, and that's what our project follows. And I think you can get so much luckier, and there's so much risk in exploration. You have to reduce it at every step. Yep. And I think that's the first place you do it.
Now, so you've done that on the Goldrange set of titles, but you started drilling. You took your RAB rigs up there in May, up to the camp, and you've been drilling this one prospect area called Day Tripper. What was the tipping factor that made you concentrate your efforts first at Day Tripper relative to Cloud Drifter or Langara or any other zone within that broader license area? Was it logistics, or was it the quality of the data, or a function of the two?
It was partly logistics, because we decided to go with a RAB drill this year. So we got two drills. We're doing the diamond drilling at Cloud Drifter, and the Day Trip zone, we've got a RAB drill there. One of the reasons we wanted to use the RAB for Day Trip was because we had mineralization on surface. So it was the RAB, it's got some pros and cons. So it's working really well for us. And part of the reason is that it's, we get real-time XRF data. So, we drill the hole, and, within 1 or 2 days, like we've got the data in Leapfrog and we can see what's going on. We project that, we plan our next hole. So it's very fast. It's very effective. The RAB doesn't need water. It doesn't need, it needs minimal heli support. And so day trip just made a lot of sense because we had surface min. It's a nice rolling slope. So we can just move around with it's got, it's track mounted rig. So it can move itself. And so it was just really easy. And that's the reason we started with the RAB. Of course, RAB has cons as well. The way that the chips are returned to surface, it air blasts them through the outside of the rod. And so there's always potential for contamination with intervals that are above the sample that's been collected.
So just remind me and the viewers what RAB does. It's a rotary air blast. It's a cone or a kind of a percussion head that cuts down, and it sends it's like a percussion rig essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll do my best to kind of relay, but it's you're hammering the rock at the base of the hole, generating kind of chips and dust, and then you use the air to kind of blast that out, and that's returned on the outside of the rod.
To the outside of the rods.
Yeah. Whereas I believe the RC is through the inside. And so with the RC, you could use that for a resource, for example. And because you don't have that risk of contamination, but with RAB, you can. Apparently the risk of contamination comes in more so when you have a wet hole. And we haven't encountered any water yet at day trip. So we're pretty happy with how it's working. We have high confidence in it. And honestly, I really wish we had started with RAB sooner for other targets even. It's so fast. As I'm sure you know, our assay times last year were abysmal. It was our biggest challenge with targeting. We just had nothing to work with and we had never drilled it. And so, you're drilling, there are a lot of veins here and you're going through them. And you don't know, is this a 0.1 gram vein or is this a 20 gram vein? And we just didn't know. And that was really challenging. And with the RAB, we can find those pathfinders right away. I don't know. I'm really impressed with how it's going. And I think that I'm not concerned about cross-contamination at day trip.
Remind me, what are your average depth of holes and how deep can you go with a RAB rig? With your RAB rig?
The max depth in really good rock would be about 100 meters. We're maxing out around 50 to 70, and it's quite broken on surface. Day trip it's quite oxidized, so there's a lot of just kind of blocky, oxidized rock, and it's just a pretty grungy looking ridge. And so the drilling's not really confident, which is very normal for,
And what do you oxidize down to? Where's your oxidation depth appearing to come down to?
Pretty much the depth of drilling, I would say. You can find a lot of iron oxide minerals at depth. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's like more of a recent effect, just from the being nearly exposed, or if that's kind of like a paleo hydrothermal thing. I don't know. But it's pretty broken and oxidized so far right through. And
just kind of remind me of the day tripper. What are we looking at here? Are you trying to intersect high grade, narrow widths of quartz veins, or is this is it a bulk tonnage target?
There are sort of two bodies that we are mostly targeting. We've got a few different geophysical targets, but we wanted to start with the highest confidence. So we were looking at where soils, rock samples, and geophysics all agreed. And so we picked sort of two principal areas that looked, they were the highest confidence targets for us. And the first one is a breccia target. So last year, what we learned was that more than anything, you need a breccia to get the high grade, and that's just the situation. So now we've started to really elevate our breccia targets regionally and think, okay, well, if this is where the grade really holds together, we need to drill more of these. And that was part of the reason we decided to drill day trip. So it's about a 70 by 90 meter zone on the ridge where you get big blocks of arsenopyrite cement breccia.
Okay. So the cement is the
I think I
arsenopyrite.
lost you for a second. Sorry. Okay, we're back. So in this domain, the majority of the pieces sitting on kind of a flat ridge are these coarse chunks of breccia with sulfide cement. And most of them are really oxidized, but you can see the arsenopyrite in some of them, and the pathfinders are all there as well. And, we had samples in that material that ran up to 20 grams. I think it was between 3 and 20 grams. And so we thought, okay, well, here's a great target. We've got something on surface. We're just going to set up the RAB drill right on top of that and start drilling into it and figure out, what's its geometry and what kind of a scale could this be. And then the second target is a vein and breccia corridor that kind of disappears under talus to the west. And this one's intrusive hosted. So they're really interesting. They're quite different. The intrusive hosted body, it's also got grade. So we have a sample, 2 meters of 6.7 grams, I think. So it's good grade. We don't really see sulfide in it. So it's quite a different beast. And that's probably just a host rock thing. I would interpret that they're all part of the same hydrothermal system. But that arsenobreccia, it's coming through, intermediate mafic, volcaniclastic, siltstone, sandstone. So a lot of different things to react with there. And the intrusion is just a really monotonous diorite. So it just has less, it's just picking up less, I don't know what, but it's different. The hydrothermal mineralogy expresses quite differently there. So we sort of separated those out as targets just because they had a different character, different pathfinders, and they're a little bit spatially separated.
And does it feel like it's kind of a polyphase event? Does it feel as if there's kind of what you're seeing? Does it feel as if this is kind of a breccia that is kind of related to one event, or is this kind of a long-lived system? Was it too early to tell?
It would be hard to say that. I think there's quite a range of mineralogy that we see, sort of even aside from those two general differences. And it does appear to be fairly complex. But, so far what we have is quite a lot of rubble on surface and kind of a short mapping campaign I did there. And now we've got a bunch of chips. So I really want to see the diamond drill core and start to understand the system. It's pretty early days for those kind of interpretations, but certainly that would bode well, seeing a lot of different hydrothermal events. What's your, we'll come on to the diamond drilling, which is a future event, but what are you seeing at the moment from your drilling? So are you, you said you identified these two targets through mapping, and now you're drilling, and you've put out a news release today talking about good XRF data. So what have you seen in terms of geometry, style of mineralization? Has it confirmed what you thought you were seeing from your mapping? Have you changed your interpretation? What's the kind of the data indicating? Yeah, we definitely have changed our interpretation. I think we all pretty much agree we underestimated the scale and the continuity of the system. We were kind of targeting two fairly focused bodies that we saw on surface, but this isn't 100% outcrop, so you don't really know what's under there. And what we're seeing is that, well, for one, our pathfinders are working great. So, the pathfinder is basically all of the elements that we've identified in the region that correlate really closely with gold. So for us, that's, arsenic, bismuth, copper, lead, zinc, antimony. The XRF is picking these up with great accuracy, and it's working so well. And what's even better is that all of the pathfinders pick up in the same intercept. So we know the width and the location that we're going to have intercepts, but we don't know what the grade will be. But we can see pretty clearly, it's from here to here, and then we can start to correlate hole to hole. How is it going? It's going really well. We planned, about a month of RAB drilling, and that was going to include Langara and Standard. And almost 2 months later, we're still at day trip. We're pretty happy with what we're seeing. We've intercepted strong pathfinders in all of the holes. And, that's coupled with the chip observations as well, right? So when you find the pathfinders are really picking up, then we, take it into the microscope and look, and you're going to see predominantly, especially in the western, the intrusive target area, you see mostly quartz. And so, we know we're in the hydrothermal stuff because we don't have quartz in the intrusion. So you see a bunch of quartz, you say, okay, we're in a hydrothermal intercept, and we've got the pathfinders. So that looks really good. In the eastern target area, it's quite grungy and oxidized. So you're basically just going to see little chunks of, deep blood red something. It's some kind of iron oxide product of a sulfide. So we're not getting great mineral ID in there, but that doesn't concern me at all because similar samples on surface are associated with good grade. So it's
and you might have the situation that it's flushed. It might be that's actually a depleted zone if it's very it's very hydrothermally altered. Yes, it's good that you've got some grade at surface, but just as long as you've got that kind of mineral intensity, it's a good sign at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And the process of oxidation, it doesn't really guarantee upgrading or downgrading. It's a little bit of a crapshoot because if you're losing the sulfide, you're losing a bit of weight. And then, where was the gold? It depends if the gold was in the quartz or was it in the sulfide. You're kind of changing the grams and the tons when you oxide. And sometimes maybe you're bringing those both down, but then the grams per ton would still be the same. It's hard to say. And I don't think there's really a very significant change overall when you get oxidized material. There can be, but and even if that was the case, that wouldn't be too concerning because we could just diamond drill through that layer. Yeah.
Do you have a map which shows where you've done the RAB drilling? And perhaps you can talk on that to where you've started your RAB drilling and where you've added to it.
Can you see the screen here?
I certainly can.
Okay. So this is zoomed in of the day trip zone. So just to orient you, this is the cloud drifter. Down in the right, you can see the mouse here.
Yep.
Okay, and then day trip is about, I think, 5 kilometers to the southeast.
Yep.
And this is kind of a zoomed in of day. Actually, I'll just go out a little bit to give you a bit more context. So this is the ridge top I was talking about, and here's this like trace of this sulfide breccia that was identified. So to give you a sense of our timeline.
So that's target 1 that you described, which is oxidized, and you said it's about 70 by 90 meters.
That's right. Yeah. And that's just the breccia target area.
Yeah, and then you also have the other one, which is the sheeted vein in with the intrusion.
That's right, and that's down here, and you can see actually some pretty white rock in here. There's quite a bit of it, so it's kind of a vein and breccia. So this is sort of the location. The RAB drilling is mostly on the ridge top, and then coming down into this vein feature here. Okay. And like I said, I think we really underestimated the system. Most of our work is just kind of focused in this upper area. We did a small talus find survey. We got some rock samples and we did geophysics. And what we're seeing with the geophysics and with our drilling is that we underestimated it. And there's a lot of lateral continuity. And if you look in this view, you can see all this gossan down on the slope. We don't have any data down there. The IP lines ran through there, and we do have really nice anomalies, and they correlate with gossan. So we're just starting. And Dustin took the first sample up here in 2020. He identified a gossan. Went out there, camped, went and collected the first sample. 2021, we did that same year we did mapping, some rocks, some soils, talus finds, and then we did the IP survey. And here we are drilling only 2 years later. So it's been a pretty quick quick ride to drilling for this target. Okay, so this is zoomed in on that ridge top. So now you can kind of locate yourself. So up is north, and then here's this mapped the vein corridor that kind of disappears into talus to the west. And here's that really nice pile of breccia. And you can see the real rusty rock in here too. It's pretty easy to spot it. And the talus finds through there, picked that up as well. So we had really anomalous gold up to 8 grams in talus fines across this body. And so the strategy was to just start here, just sit right on the breccia and just start drilling into that. And then we had
to do. I mean, I can see your holes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all they're all kind of out in a basically in a kind of a starfish fan, really.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the original plan to do that starfish kind of, because you've got the one pad, you thought, right, well, we're going to set up on the breccia and we're going to drill out to the one side there and we're going to drill out to the other side here and we're going to test the other side. Was that the plan, just to drill out the breccia from the inside?
Yeah, just the plan was to just find it and try to pin down a geometry. So we figured, well, our best interpretation would be it's probably steep. It's a breccia body, so it's probably cylindrical, and we just work from there. So we wanted to collar right in it as best we could and just start pinning down its geometry.
And had you already planned to do that second pad down that other line, to where holes 9, 10, and 11 and 12 are?
This cluster, that wasn't planned. No. So we left some room for kind of chasing it down, but this was kind of a follow-up of what we hit here.
Yeah. So you were definitely going to drill 2, 3, 4, or 5 holes from that first pad, and then you were going to potentially move the RAB rig, depending on what you saw, to another target area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're up to hole 27. Is that the top, the highest hole number I can see?
Yeah, and there are some more coming as well. So we've got a couple more pads in here and down here.
Okay.
And I think we're moving any day now to Langara. We finally decided we're running out of time for the RAB, so we got to get our other targets drilled. Okay.
And those lines, that line 3500 and the line 3700, is that, have you got a local grid set up? And so those 100-meter spacings?
These are the IP lines. And so these little arrows are showing you where the conductors and the chargeability anomalies are located along that line. And you can see here, they correlate really nicely with our surface geochem, actually. Yeah. So they pick up this breccia perfectly. Actually, it works really well. And same thing with the vein corridor, you're picking it up here. So we had pretty high confidence in the geophys. We have numerous anomalies to the east and west of these lines as well that we haven't tested. But when you're drilling that short of holes, we don't want to take big step outs. We want to what we're trying to do is pin this down so that we can diamond drill it efficiently. And the diamond drill is really expensive, and the RAB has been an amazing tool to outline what the geometry is, because these systems are very hard to chase. They're going to do this and then this and then this, and we have to kind of pattern that out. And that's been one of our challenges at Cloud Drifter. It's mostly undercover, and we're trying to drill this big target with structurally focused min within it, and the RAB has done such a great job of getting this ready.
So I can see you put in pretty much 19 holes into that sulfide breccia, and you've got these holes 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23 are in the, let's call it the gap zone, and then you've got 24 to 27 inside the mapped vein corridor, with the two things in progress, one kind of filling in that gap and the other one to the south of the breccia. How are these related to each other? Did you find the edges of the breccia? Are you seeing lots of vein material in that vein corridor? Is it, how are they relating to each other?
Okay. So I'll just point out, sort of as we're describing these targets, the breccia target area is going to include sort of this hole and this hole in progress. So it's sort of this domain here. And mostly that's wall rock hosted min, and it has a certain pathfinder signature. The intrusive target area is best kept. It's, this whole cluster, because the intrusion is low angle. So these ones are kind of targeting that general sort of min as well. In terms of how they're related, I think in general, actually, this is probably an easier slide to show you if I just jump to this one. So these are the XRF results. As I mentioned previously, these are the pathfinders for gold. So, we're not presenting these because we think we're onto base metal system with the copper, lead, and zinc. We know that these are associated with gold, and they have a pretty good correlation throughout. And so they're all showing the same pattern. So everywhere we're getting these intercepts, we're seeing these pathfinders pick up, and we're seeing vein material or breccia material in the chips. So I would say overall, we've got kind of two major kind of structural features and then a few question marks. This breccia target that we interpreted was steep. Well, maybe there's one steep and we don't know where it is, but what we did hit was this kind of gently dipping feature. You can see it here pretty nice. Yeah. Like this. Yeah. And that projects into that domain. And it broadly correlates with our bedding geometry. And so we need to see the rocks to interpret this, because it would be, I wouldn't normally interpret a breccia to be low angle like this, but we do see breccia class within this. We're not really clear on what that means, but it is a low angle horizon. Yeah. And so it could be something highly reactive. We have a lot of really mafic and clastic rocks around, and those, I'm sure you know, are just incredibly reactive and really good at dumping out gold. And so there's probably a component to that. I don't believe it just came in like that. I think there are feeders to that, but we're going to need more than 50-meter depth to understand that. But I think we got really lucky here in the breccia target area, because the low angle geometry is so easy to drill with the RAB, because it only goes shallow. But this would have been, diamond drill almost would have been overkill for this. Yeah. But this gave us a chance to hit it several times and get its geometry. So that's kind of the main thing we found. We have a major structural zone to the south, and I think this min zone is probably rooted in that. We tried to drill it a few times and it didn't go well. It's a major structure, and we couldn't get the holes very deep in there. So that's going to be a job for the diamond drill. Yeah. That's a pretty important part of the story. So we have this east-west steeply cell dipping structural zone. Can I ask you just to sorry, you said the main structural, the deeper structural zone you said is east-west. Yeah. So there's an east-west major structural zone, and then we have this kind of low west dipping, possibly bed parallel domain. And then we have, I didn't get to the kind of sheeted vein and breccia zone in the intrusive hosted area, but this is northerly and it dips to the east. And I love seeing so many different geometries at play. I think it's just such a good indication, such a good structural setting to have sort of three really strong prevailing geometries. And I just really like that we're getting low angle and steep and multiple geometries that are that these fluids are clearly traveling along. Have you sketched out a diamond drill plan already, or are you going to wait for the assays? No, the assays should be in any day now already from the first holes. I don't believe it's going to greatly change what we want to diamond drill. We know there's grade. We know where these intervals are. We don't know what the gold will be yet, but I think we will start getting the gold in by the time the diamond drill goes there. But we don't need to. I think we've got what we need. We've got the structural patterns, and we've already started plunking our diamond drill plan into Leapfrog to start to look at how this all comes together. Because you have this and this and this, and they're clearly all centered on something. And one of the really nice things about day trip is that these are the shallowest vein textures that we see so far. And what I think that implies is that we could have a significant vertical to play with, because we have other zones throughout the district where we know we can get high grade gold for a given texture or mineralogy. And so if we know we're at the very top of this, and we could prove this out. We've got so much vertical playroom, and this being on the top of the ridge, there's a lot of opportunity for, setting up a drill hole like in the valley bottom and kind of going in from either side, for example. So, it's going to be pretty neat to see how this starts to come to depth.
When you are tinkering in Leapfrog and kind of throwing ideas out, are you putting down are you tracing 200-meter holes, 400-meter holes? I know this is budget dependent. I know it's going to get cleared by the board and all of that, but just what are you amongst yourselves, kind of the geologists around the terminal, the computer terminal of an evening? What are you thinking? And obviously, you've got an eye on kind of logistics and commercial returns, and I can sense from the way that you talk about that you're interested in getting value results rather than just doing a science project.
It's hard to say how we're going to drill, because if we're still in the system, we will obviously keep drilling. We need to twin our best intercepts, right? And so those are kind of scattered about, but we need to go back to those pads and twin those and confirm that the RAB accurately sampled that material.
Yeah.
One of the challenges with planning the deeper drill targets is that our geophysics doesn't go deep enough. We have just kind of that upper skin. I think it's 150 meters the line's projected down to. And
okay.
So, when we're trying to target below that, we don't have great data. So I guess I would say that as we get deeper, we're getting into lower confidence domain, not in terms of prospectivity, in terms of de-risking it. And we're looking at doing deeper IP because the IP is working so well. And I think it might be conservative to refrain from deep drilling until we have that data and we can really do it cost efficiently.
Might you be able to do that IP this year?
We're looking into that.
Okay.
Good. But the drill, we do plan to get a drill on this zone potentially in the quite near future, potentially in a week or 2 weeks. And so we wouldn't likely have that data when we start, but we've already outlined enough with the RAB that we've got a lot already to test. And the fact that we couldn't get at all really through that easterly structural zone that we think this is very much rooted in, that's a fair bit of meters right there, just testing some of that strike length of that fault zone.
I mean, pick a number, 10 meters at 250 meters average is 2,500 meters of drilling. And, some will be 100-meter holes and some might be 350-meter holes.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of ballpark you're thinking, kind of 2,000, 3,000 meters? For just the diamond drilling? Yeah.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah, we could increase. I mean, right now we've been talking about a minimum of 7,500 meters of diamond drilling, and we would like to do probably at least 5,000 at Cloud Drifter, but that leaves quite a bit of room. So, 2,500 meters could be reasonable, but we'll have to see how the drilling goes. Like, it's quite broken. It's going to be a bit of a challenge. We'll probably have to start with HQ and just get through that rubble and then see how that goes. But that it is shallow drilling, it could go really quick. So, if it's going good and we could drill off, the shallow min, like we could be getting pretty good meters there. So that's the challenge. The budget for the drilling depends a lot on how the production goes and how far that money can go.
Maybe if we get in triple tubing, it might help you. But listen, we've been speaking about day trip, and we need to, if you could, we need to touch on Langara and Cloud Drifter, what your aims are for this year.
Absolutely. Which one should we talk about first?
Well, you said the RAB rig was going to Langara.
Yes. So we'll be moving to Langara after day trip. And we've got quite a no-brainer target at Langara. So Langara was discovered initially by prospectors, and they went in, on horseback and, went up these ridiculous talus slopes. And they were able to, develop a few adits around. And that's like a lot of the exploration, a lot of the work that happened on this property was mostly in the 1930s with these adits, and it really hasn't been a lot since. So that was the kind of discovery story for Langara. And they mined like right into the slope, quite a gnarly, steep slope. You can actually still see the pack trail kind of zigzagging up the talus slope. And that's what we want to drill. We want to drill the adit. We found, these blocks of rock that were from the dump pile. And so we don't know what they were mining, what was extracted. The blocks they dumped out were, just straight hydrothermal, quartz, sulfide. And, we threw some of those in a bag. We got like 14 grams from the rejects. It's probably some kind of a breccia. It's in a really broken zone. It's where we get like a northerly kind of vein trend meets an easterly one. So it's a very structurally complicated zone with a lot of fracturing. So I would imagine some kind of like cylinder that's sort of that intersection line between the sort of easterly structural zone and the northerly sheeted vein trend. And so we managed to build a pad right on top of the adit. And we're going to do the same as we did at Day Trip, just drill, a kind of spider pattern off of that pad and see if we can just figure out what the geometry is and where it is. And again, this is de-risking for diamond drilling, trying to get as much info and geometry as we can. Langara deserves a lot more work. It's kind of been a bit ignored, not for any good reason. It's a great target. Cloud Drifter took so much of our energy getting that worked up and ready for diamond drilling. And we haven't put enough work into Langara. And I think more RAB drilling will help a lot. But we've got Min all the way, back to the backside of Langara. And it really is a mountain scale, right? It's a whole mountain. And we get kind of veins and mineralization throughout. And we haven't really put that story together very well yet. But
but we need to talk about the story. It's about building up those layers of data: the geology, the mapping, the geochemistry, the spectral information. The whole range of layers that normally one does prior to drilling. And it looks as if you're in the process of compiling that, but putting in some RAB holds just because you've got a focal point. Yeah,
I think RAB could be a really good way to start to pin down what the patterns are doing in different areas, because we've got quite a few different areas of mineralization, but the target would be something, at depth. Like we need to see where these patterns kind of come together, where these structural zones are. One of the challenges with Langara is because of the topography, it's not, you can't build a pad everywhere. And because of that, I think we need to have pretty high confidence in what we're actually seeing, that, what we think is happening. And, if you can do conservative pads if you can build them everywhere, but we can't. So we need to do a better job. And one of the challenges there's a poritic background, because the early hornfells made this like big poritic hornfells, which we don't get in the other zones. It doesn't really have any significance to the mineral system, in my opinion. It's totally but it does interfere with our ability to do IP, and that's why we haven't done IP Langara, and that's the main reason why we don't know as much about Langara. And I think RAB could be a key there. Doing even grid RAB drilling in kind of different areas of the mountain, putting together concept, and then going in with the diamond drill and drilling those deeper holes to kind of target these feeders.
So it sounds that Langara is pretty much a kind of you're going to use this as a proof of concept, almost a play opener. So
we need to show that adit's there, see if we can find it, and we don't know what kind of grades we're talking about. Langara is clearly a unique system. It has a different, slightly different pathfinders and mineralogy compared to Cloud Drifter, and I think it makes sense to approach that as its own system. And so, one of the things we have to prove is, what can that system do? Is its best better than Cloud Drifter, or where does it kind of sit in that group of gold systems like Day Trip and all of those? And that's part of what we need to do with this hole is see what that ore shoot actually was. that they were pulling out of there.
Okay, good. And that takes us straight through to Cloud Drifter, which has obviously absorbed a lot of information, absorbed a lot of energy. You know, you say you've done a lot of work to get it ready for drilling. So you've built up those layers. You presumably relied quite a lot on the IP just by inference.
We used the IP. So last year, I'll just kind of give a recap on kind of what we did and sort of what we're doing this year. So last year, our key data sets were the soil grid and our IP. And we mostly focused on the chargeability because it did correlate with surface min. And I mean, Cloud Drifter is steep and it's mostly covered in trees. And so, all of the surface data we could get there, we worked really hard for. And so we had limited surface info. So, I didn't have the luxury of going out and mapping out a fault or a vein corridor. We did find some local areas where we could do that, but it wasn't enough data to target with. And so we leaned heavily on our soil geochemistry, and we used chargeability because it looked pretty good. And we had 4 kind of pretty focused highs that we wanted to test. What we found, what we learned from that was that I think it's the conductivity that is doing a better job at Cloud Drifter. So chargeability is picking up more just like disseminated or disconnected sulfide. And this is a big hydrothermal system, and you can see sulfide from the top to bottom pretty much of every hole that we drilled at Cloud Drifter. It's kind of it's sort of omnipresent. And so those chargeability highs.
Sorry, you talk about what you drilled at Cloud Drifter. These are the holes you drilled last year.
Yeah, last year. And so it's too much noise, and the chargeability wasn't picking up the high grade. And so we drilled the chargeability, and it didn't really work that well. And the soil anomalies, what we're learning from last year as well is that there isn't a 1-to-1. So we know we have a 3 kilometer by 2 kilometer, monster soil anomaly, and it's a big gold system. It has a lot of continuity, and that's what the drilling demonstrated as well. Broad gold anomalism in these drill holes, but the soils aren't working very well to target high grade either. So they're getting us into the area and they're working, but it's not a 1-to-1. We have examples of areas where we hit, grade almost at surface, and there's no soil response there. And vice versa. We've had areas with some of our highest soil response, and we didn't really hit something comparable in the drill hole. And so we're weighting our targeting much less on those data sets. And this year we're moving to conductivity. And part of the reason I think the conductivity is working is that we found the grade is closely associated with breccia. And so the high grade intervals, you need the breccia. Breccias are cemented by sulfide. And with a conductor, you want to see like continuity or connectivity of the sulfide. So, like VMS is a good example where you would use that data set because you should have a horizon of connected sulfide minerals, whereas chargeability would work, for example, really well with porphyry.
Okay, so can I just ask, did you go back and reinterpret the IP and the data sets? Did you reinterrogate your geophysical data sets to focus on the conductivity, or did you have to do new geophysics?
No, the IP is all the same. But all we did was we looked at it and we saw, okay, we've got a couple holes that are going into the lower mountain. Most of our drilling was kind of in the upper mountain. So we had a couple go into the lower mountain, and the one that didn't hit was out of the conductor, and the one that did hit was in the conductor. And so it was like, well, that makes sense. So we're going to weight a little heavier on that. And really, in general, the best way to sum up our program is, last year we were in the upper mountain, and this year we're moving down. And there's a difference between the upper. We have this amphibole pyroxene diorite sill in the upper mountain and a brittle deformation zone there. In the lower mountain, it's younger, evolved, quartz diorite sill, low angle sill. And for whatever reason, I don't know yet, but the mineralization seems to be much more focused in the lower mountain. And it might have to do with that host rock, some kind of rheology feature. You know, that upper diorite is so reactive. It may be that its effect is just a very distributed style of mineralization, whereas in the lower mountain, it's not as reactive, and then you can get these really focused. Or it might have to do with kind of the difference between a feeder and, you know, in the lower mountain, you're getting more into kind of structurally focused feeder zones. And then as you go up, they're kind of, you know, maybe distributing laterally.
Stress is, you know, the high pressure, whatever it is, the kind of maybe the stress actually contained the fluid flow into more discrete zones. You mentioned earlier that you've got a kind of a 5,000 meter minimum target for cloud drifter. Have you started that? Yeah,
we're well into that. So we've got sort of three broad target areas as we've kind of clustered them. So it's we're calling one the eastern target area, and that's kind of in the lower or northern east cloud drifter. We've got the pad 400 target area, which is largely follow up from last year.
Yeah.
And then we've got the western target area. So we wanted to start with the pad 400, and we're on our third pad there.
Okay. And what are you seeing? I mean, is it encouraging? I mean, we've very much started with day tripper. Is that because that's where the most exciting geology you're seeing is, or is it equally good in cloud drifter?
Well, they're difficult to compare. The other challenge is that at day trip, we have data, you know, we have something already returned. We can define our zones. At cloud drifter, although we have seen min last year and we started to learn how it grades, it's very difficult to predict. So, you know, we've got, we're doing way more structural targeting this year. And so for the pad 400 area, most of our targets are structural and structural intersections. And everywhere that we projected those, we're getting mineralization. And I can't predict at all what it's going to be, but everything's where we predicted it. And we're super happy with our structural data set this year. We had Dan Core with Fathom Geophysics work on our mag and LiDAR data, and he came up with some new structural interp, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was totally predictive, which is why I think it's fantastic. When we started plotting them up, you know, you look at last year's drilling, and everywhere he projects one, we have an intercept, and that's what we're seeing this year too. You know, where those structures are that he's predicted, we're finding the hydrothermal material kind of right where it should be. So I don't think there's anything too weird going on here. We're stepping out from what we had last year, like, you know, following up on 73 grams over a meter, and then we've got the 6.88 over 9 meters of breccia down there. And those are along a structural, they correlate structurally, and they're separated by about 100 meters. So that's kind of just a super easy target to say, okay, well, let's infill that and try to target areas that we think are going to be more complicated along that structural trend. So yeah, it's really nice to see it's working. That's something we didn't have at all last year. You know, we had a few structures that we had interpreted, but they were so biased on the outcrop, because, you know, I did the structural mapping there in 2020. But all of my data was coming from kind of this small area up on the ridge and on the cliff. And then we tried to sort of project that in and make that work, and it didn't. And we were missing, you know, most of the key structures. And, you know, we did try to target some of the LiDAR structures, but what we're finding is that I think the most fundamental faults are not, they're more resistive. And so the ones that are filled with hydrothermal stuff, they're not necessarily making, you know, a planar topographic low. And I think that where you see the planar topo low, it's kind of an offset late little shift. And so you get the fluids coming in, and then they seal it. And then you get something lateral to that just kind of breaks. And so then it sort of tricks you and gets you off from the structure you should be targeting.
Do you have any images of that structural interpretation in your kind of drill plan?
Yeah, I think I do. Let me just...
We should be wrapping up quite soon, but...
Okay, so this is This is the pad 400 target area. So these are our intercepts from last year, the yellow and the red. And we only had one pad in the lower mountain, and that was mostly because we were limited by starting in the upper mountain, and then we were limited by pad builders. So we didn't get to drill a lot of these lower targets.
Yeah. So
this line work is this is the work Dan did for us. And, he gave these geometry, he figured out, cross-cutting relationships. I mean, you can see these are really well done. He doesn't just draw lines everywhere that just kind of mutually cross each other for no reason. He did a really good job, and all of them, he justified the reasons. And anywhere that I did manage to map structures where I had enough outcrop, they coincide perfectly. And, he's even putting the kinematic sense on them, and it was the same as what I had in the field. So it's quite a good product. And
where's the drilling planned? So you're drilling 5,000 meters across those 3 white circles, and and you're in the middle of drilling the follow-up, the phase 2 follow-up in the pad 400 target area. Yeah, so we're here right now, and then we'll soon move to the eastern target, and we'll get into this one, and then we'll do the western target next, is our plan. And those are conductivity anomalies that you've shown there on the geophysics. There are quite a few things we're looking at. Like, I'll just back up a little bit. So this is where we're going next. This is the eastern target area. The main merits of this target is the texture of the rock, and it's hard to communicate, I think, but I'll try. It's basically that we have very spaced out outcrop. Where we sample it, we're getting high grade. You can see the grade here. But we're really compelled by the texture. So these kind of textures are they're really diffuse. The veins are really stringer, and these rock samples are representative of these small outcrops that we found in the forest. They're not just really focused veins that we chipped out. This is representative, and what these drill holes are testing in the east is the possibility that these for continuity. So you can see down here, this is the measurement like between these outcrops with these examples. And we believe there's potential for continuity. So it's a classic bulk tonnage target. Yeah, you could say that. That would be the idea. So not as much of a structurally focused zone. And we have a few reasons to think that it is different there. We don't actually have, we have a conductivity anomaly there. We've got a chargeability anomaly there. Dan interpreted a large scale structural intersection domain from his fault line work. And he also interpreted, as you saw on the last slide, this, wrong way. He interpreted a radial symmetry feature, which his interpretation is that is a location for a steep feeder body, possible intrusion or structural feeder zone. And it's right in this area where we see these rock textures. Of all the thin sections that I've got, only 2 from one location stained for potassium as well. And it just indicates, these fluids are probably heating up. There's something unique happening here, more acidic. And this is the concept with this target. So we have very little surface data, but what we have seen suggests that there could be big potential here. When are you going to drill the eastern target area? It could be any time now. Right. It hinges on kind of what we hit in the pad 400, and when we decide we're comfortable, putting a pause on that. Our strategy is potentially to come back to pad 400. So we want to get a few in there, get the assays while we're drilling another target, and then come back and target based on those assays. Like, as I mentioned, we do have way shorter assay time, which is great, but it's not as good as the RAB, where we just have immediate targeting info. And then we're going to finish on the western target. Thank you, Gayle, so much for taking me through that. It's really nice speaking to a geologist actually in the field and kind of living the program. It gives it a much more immediate sense. Are you splitting your time between Cloud Drifter logging the core and day trip? Well, I'm right now, because I've got a baby, I'm doing a lot of more work from home. So a lot of my work right now is in Leapfrog. So Paul Stewart, he's
he's running the program here, and we're kind of constantly on leapfrog together, putting in all of our real-time data and just targeting. And so that's a lot of what I do. And then I check in as often as I can to get to see the core and the rock chips. Like, this is my third visit this summer, but I can't be here all the time. Unfortunately, I wish I could.
Well, great. Thank you so much for talking to me. And I very much look forward to seeing the ongoing progress at both those target areas, both those prospect areas.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Merlin.
Great. No worries. See you later.
Okay. Yeah.